Everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. We're going to explore something I think is really fascinating. How reading can unlock a deeper love for the English language.
It is pretty cool.
We've got some great research and expert advice for you all today.
We do. We even have some real-life success stories.
Oh, I love those. All pointing to reading as a secret weapon for English learners, right?
That's right. And you know, it's funny, we often think of reading as this solitary thing.
Yeah.
But when you really think about it, it's all about connection.
It is, yeah.
Connecting with stories, connecting with different cultures, and even connecting with yourself.
Right.
As you discover more about how you learn best.
I love that. Okay, so we have got a stack of sources here ready to be unpacked. What's the mission for this deep dive? What are we hoping to uncover for our listener today?
Well, our goal is to help you see reading not just as a study technique,
Right.
but as a gateway to truly understanding and falling in love with English.
I like that.
And we're aiming to give you some really actionable takeaways today to make reading in English not just effective, but genuinely enjoyable.
Okay, I'm hooked. Let's dive in.
Let's do it.
So one of the first things that jumped out at me from our sources was this idea. Reading is more than just a study technique. It's a gateway to truly understanding and loving English.
I love that.
What do you think about that?
It absolutely resonates. You know, there's this fascinating concept in language acquisition called the input hypothesis.
Oh.
It was developed by Dr. Stephen Krashen. And don't worry if you haven't heard of it before.
Right.
It basically says that we learn language best when we're exposed to what's called comprehensible input.
Comprehensible input. Okay, break that down for me. I'm intrigued.
Okay, so think of it this way. Imagine you're playing a video game.
Okay.
And you keep encountering enemies that are just slightly stronger than you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a challenge, but you can still defeat them, and each victory helps you level up.
Right.
Comprehensible input is kind of like that for language learning.
Okay.
It's language that's just a bit above your current level.
Yeah.
But still understandable.
Got it.
So you're stretching yourself, but not getting totally overwhelmed.
Okay, I get it. So reading gives us this comprehensible input naturally because we're encountering new words and grammar in the context of a story.
Exactly.
It's like leveling up our English skills without even realizing it.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And reading is such a fantastic way to get this input because it's enjoyable and natural.
Right.
Think about how you learned your first language.
Yeah.
By being constantly surrounded by it.
Right.
Reading does the same for English. You're immersed in the language, and your brain is naturally making connections and absorbing new information.
So choosing the right reading material is probably super important, right?
It is.
We need that Goldilocks zone.
Yes.
Not too easy, not too hard.
Absolutely key. That's why our source stresses picking things you genuinely enjoy.
Right.
Because if you're forcing yourself to read something dry or boring, it's going to feel like a chore.
And you're less likely to stick with it. But when you're invested in a story, the language learning happens almost effortlessly.
Wait, so you're telling me that by reading things I actually find interesting, I can improve my English? That's amazing.
It is amazing.
No more forcing myself to read boring textbooks.
That's the beauty of it. One of our sources even puts it simply, don't make reading a chore.
Oh, I get that.
Choose topics and genres that spark your interest, whether it's mysteries, sci-fi, romance, or anything else. If you're enjoying the reading, you're more likely to stick with it, and that's when the real magic happens.
Okay, so we've established that reading is more than just a study tool. It's a way to truly connect with and enjoy English.
It is.
But I think our listener is ready for some specifics.
Yeah.
What are the actual benefits, the tangible results someone can expect to see by making reading a part of their English language journey?
Let's get to the good stuff. Our sources highlight 3 major benefits that I think will really resonate with you. Vocabulary growth, a deeper understanding of both the language and the culture, and believe it or not, improvement in your own writing and speaking.
Wow, that's a lot of benefits packed into one activity. Okay, let's unpack each of these, starting with vocabulary. How does reading actually help someone learn new words?
Think about it this way. You come across a new word in a book, let's say, the word serendipity, which one of our sources uses as an example.
Okay.
Now, you might not know the meaning immediately, but because you're reading it in context within a story, you can often figure it out from the surrounding sentences, right?
Right.
You're learning it organically, like you would in a real conversation, not just memorizing a definition from a dictionary.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's like picking up a new word from a friend in a conversation. You understand it from the situation, not just the word itself. It's way more natural.
Precisely. And the best part is, as you encounter that word again and again in different books and articles, your understanding of it deepens, and it eventually becomes part of your active vocabulary, something you can use confidently in your own speaking and writing.
Okay, that's vocabulary.
Yeah.
Now, what about comprehension and cultural understanding? How does reading help with that?
Think of it this way. English isn't just individual words, right?
No.
It's about how those words are used together.
Mm-hmm.
The expressions, the idioms,
Right.
the cultural references that give the language its richness and personality. And reading immerses you in all of that.
Right.
One of our sources used the example of Pride and Prejudice.
Okay.
Imagine how much you could learn about 19th century British society just by reading that one book.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I never thought about reading Pride and Prejudice as a cultural deep dive. I'm seeing reading in a whole new light.
Exactly. And it's not just historical fiction. Every book, every article, every blog post offers a window into a different world, a different way of thinking, a different way of using language. By reading diversely, you're expanding your understanding of English far beyond just textbook definitions.
Okay, on to the last benefit, and I'm curious about this one. How does reading improve someone's writing and speaking?
Okay.
It seems like those are active skills, while reading is more passive.
That's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
By reading, you're exposed to how skilled writers structure sentences, use transitions, build arguments, create dialogue, all those elements that make writing effective and engaging.
Right.
It's like having a master class in communication right at your fingertips.
Wait, so by just reading, I could absorb these writing skills without even realizing it.
You could.
That's mind-blowing.
Think of it like learning to ride a bike.
Okay.
You watch others do it, you might fall a few times yourself.
Yeah.
But eventually you just start doing it yourself. The same applies to writing and even speaking. One of our sources used The Catcher in the Rye as an example.
Right.
Just by reading that book, a learner might pick up on phrases like phony, which was popularized by that book.
Right. Or learn how to structure casual conversations based on the dialogue style.
I see.
It's subtle but powerful.
Okay, I'm sold on the benefits.
Great.
But let's be real, reading in a new language can be intimidating.
It can?
How do we make it less daunting and more enjoyable?
You're absolutely right. It's not just about the why, but the how.
Right.
Luckily, our sources are packed with strategies to make reading in English not just effective, but a habit you actually look forward to.
Okay, I'm ready to dive into those strategies. I think our listeners too.
Me too.
All right, we'll get into that in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, so we've seen why reading is like a superpower for English learners. But now, let's dive into the fun part. How do we actually do this? How do we make reading in English a habit we genuinely enjoy? Our sources have some awesome tips, right?
They do, they really do. And it's all about finding what works best for you.
Yeah.
Your learning style and your interests. There's no one-size-fits-all approach, which is actually great because it means you can tailor your reading experience to be as enjoyable as possible.
Okay, I love that. So where do we begin? What are some of the strategies our sources suggest?
Let's start with something called graded readers. Have you heard of these?
Vaguely. Remind me what they are.
Okay, so they're basically books that are specifically written for language learners.
Okay.
The language is simplified, the vocabulary is controlled, and the sentences are a bit shorter and easier to follow.
So it's kind of like training wheels for reading.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
They help you build up your reading muscles before you tackle those big, complex novels you might have on your reading list.
I like that. And you know what? That makes a lot of sense. I remember when I first started learning Spanish,
Yeah.
I tried jumping into Don Quixote, and I was so lost.
Oh, yeah.
I wish I had known about graded readers then.
It's a common mistake. We get so excited to dive into those classic books
Right.
that we forget that even walking takes practice before you can run a marathon.
So true.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got graded readers. What else? What about those bilingual books I've seen at the bookstore?
Those are fantastic, especially for beginners or anyone who feels a bit intimidated by reading in English.
Yeah.
Imagine having the English text side by side with your native language.
Right.
If you get stuck on a word or phrase, you can just glance over to get a quick translation.
That takes away so much of the anxiety. It's like having a safety net while you're reading.
Exactly. And as you get more comfortable and your English improves, you might find yourself relying less and less on the translations.
Right.
You'll naturally transition to reading fully in English, and it will feel like a smooth, natural progression.
Okay, I'm loving these tips. What about audiobooks?
Yeah.
I'm a huge audiobook fan, but I'm always a little hesitant to listen to them in English.
Sure.
Any advice on incorporating audiobooks into language learning?
Here's a technique that combines the best of both worlds. Listening to an audiobook while simultaneously reading the text. Have you ever tried that?
You mean like following along in the physical book while the narrator reads? Actually, yes, I have. I find it really helps me focus, and I feel like I'm absorbing more of the language that way.
It's an incredibly effective strategy. Not only are you seeing the words, but you're also hearing how they're pronounced.
Right.
With the correct intonation and rhythm. It brings the story to life and helps you internalize those nuances of spoken English that can be hard to pick up from just reading text.
You know what I've noticed when I do that? It's amazing how much emphasis the narrator puts on certain words or phrases.
Yeah.
And it totally changes the meaning.
Exactly. It helps you understand how those subtle shifts in emphasis can convey different emotions and intentions.
Yeah.
It's like getting a free lesson in spoken English fluency.
It is. Okay, I have to ask, what about reading aloud myself?
Yeah.
I remember doing that in school as a kid. But is that actually helpful for adult language learners?
You might be surprised how beneficial it is.
Okay.
It might feel a bit silly at first, but trust me, when you read aloud, you're engaging multiple senses.
Right.
You're seeing the words, you're saying the words, you're hearing yourself pronounce them. It helps you become more aware of your pronunciation, your intonation, and even your rhythm.
So even if I feel a bit self-conscious, it's worth pushing past that and giving it a try.
Absolutely. Pick a short passage from a book you're enjoying and read it aloud like you're performing for an audience. You might even want to record yourself and listen back.
Oh, that's a good idea.
It's a great way to identify areas where you can improve.
All right, I'm going to try that. It sounds like a fun way to practice. And, you know, it brings up something else I've been thinking about. Reading can sometimes feel like such a solitary activity.
It can.
Are there any ways to make it more social and interactive? Especially when you're learning a new language.
There are definitely ways to make it more social. Joining a book club is a fantastic option.
Oh, yeah. I could see how that would be awesome. Sharing your thoughts and interpretations with other people who are reading the same book.
Yes.
Debating plot twists.
Yeah.
Analyzing characters. That sounds like so much fun.
It really is. It takes reading from the solitary activity to this shared experience. And it's a fantastic way to practice your English communication skills in a relaxed and supportive environment. You can discuss your favorite parts of the book, ask questions, and even learn from other people's perspectives.
And you might even make some new friends along the way. Okay, last but not least, any tips on how to really make sure I'm getting the most out of what I'm reading? Like, how do I make sure I'm not just skimming the words, but really understanding and remembering the information?
Here's a simple but powerful technique. Annotate as you read.
Annotate. You mean like highlighting and taking notes in the margins?
Exactly. Don't be afraid to mark up your book.
Okay.
Highlight interesting phrases, new vocabulary words, or passages that spark questions.
Right.
You can even jot down your own thoughts and reactions in the margins. It's like having a conversation with the author, actively engaging with the text instead of just passively reading it.
It's like taking ownership of the reading process.
It is.
Making it more personal and interactive.
Exactly. And the best part is when you go back and review your annotations later, it helps solidify what you've learned and makes the information much more memorable.
Wow, we've covered a lot of great strategies.
You have.
Graded readers, bilingual books, audiobooks, reading aloud, book clubs, annotation. It's like a whole toolkit for making reading in English both enjoyable and effective.
It is. And the key takeaway here is that it's all about experimentation.
Right.
Try different approaches, see what resonates with you, and most importantly, make it fun.
Speaking of fun, I think it's time for some inspiration.
Okay.
I know our listeners are probably curious to hear about people who have actually used these strategies to achieve amazing results with their English. Let's dive into some real-life success stories in the next part of our deep dive. All right, it's story time.
I love story time.
I don't know about you, but I always find it so inspiring to hear about real people who have achieved amazing things.
Me.
Especially when it comes to something as challenging as language learning. Our sources have some incredible stories about people who have transformed their English skills through reading, right?
We really do. And these aren't just stories about reaching fluency. They're about the joy of discovery, the confidence that comes from pushing past your comfort zone, and the unexpected ways reading can connect you with the world.
Okay, I'm ready to be inspired. Tell me about these amazing people.
Okay, so the first story is about a woman named Maria. When we first meet her in the source material, she's feeling really intimidated by the idea of reading in English.
Okay.
She wants to improve, but she doesn't know where to start, and it all feels a bit overwhelming.
I think a lot of us can relate to that feeling. So how did Maria overcome that initial fear?
She decided to take a leap of faith and dive into the Harry Potter series in English.
Wow. Harry Potter is a pretty ambitious choice for someone who's feeling intimidated by reading in English. I admire her courage.
It was definitely a challenge. But that's also what made it so rewarding.
Right.
She started slowly, often with a dictionary by her side.
I can imagine.
But as she progressed through the book, something amazing happened. She found herself relying less and less on translations and more on the context of the story to understand the language.
That's incredible. It's like her brain was naturally starting to make connections and decode the language, just like we were talking about earlier with the input hypothesis.
Exactly. By immersing herself in the world of Harry Potter, she was unconsciously absorbing the language,
Right.
picking up new vocabulary and getting comfortable with complex grammar structures, all while enjoying a captivating story. And here's the best part. Maria eventually became so fluent that she could discuss the books with native English speakers,
Wow.
sharing her thoughts and interpretations with ease.
That's such a powerful testament to the idea that consistency and perseverance really do pay off.
Yeah.
She turned her fear into a passion, and that's truly inspiring.
It is, and it shows that even if you start small, even if you feel intimidated at first, with the right approach and a bit of determination, you can achieve incredible results.
Absolutely. Okay, do you have another story for us?
I do. This one is about a man named Kareem, who was specifically focused on improving his pronunciation and speaking confidence.
Okay, tell me about Kareem. I struggle with pronunciation sometimes, so I'm eager to hear how he tackled that challenge.
He discovered this technique called shadow reading,
Okay.
and it completely transformed his spoken English.
Shadow reading. I've never heard of that. What is
Okay, imagine you have a speaking partner who's a native English speaker,
Okay.
and you're trying to perfectly mirror their pronunciation, their intonation, their rhythm, even their pauses.
Right.
That's essentially what shadow reading is.
Got it.
You listen to an audiobook or a recording of someone speaking, and you read along aloud, trying to match their voice as closely as possible.
Oh, wow. That sounds like an intense workout for your pronunciation muscles.
It is, but it's incredibly effective. Kareem found that by practicing shadow reading consistently, he started to notice a huge difference in his own pronunciation.
Interesting.
He was able to pick up on those subtle nuances of spoken English, like how native speakers stress certain syllables or connect words together.
Right.
And his spoken English started to sound much more natural and fluent.
That's amazing. It's like having a personal pronunciation coach right there in your headphones.
It is.
I'm definitely adding shadow reading to my list of things to try. You know, what I love about both of these stories,
Yeah.
Maria and Kareem, is that they highlight how reading can be so much more than just a way to learn vocabulary and grammar.
Right.
It's a path to confidence, to self-discovery,
It is.
to connecting with the world in a deeper way.
I completely agree. And these are just two examples.
Of course.
There are countless stories out there of people who have used reading to achieve their language learning goals,
Right.
to unlock their potential, and to enrich their lives in unexpected ways.
I love that.
It's a reminder that no matter where you are in your journey, whether you're just starting out or you're already quite fluent, reading can be a powerful tool for growth and transformation.
Okay, so we've heard these inspiring stories, and we've got this amazing toolkit of strategies.
Yes.
But I know a lot of listeners are probably wondering, where do I actually begin? What should I read? The world of books can feel pretty overwhelming, especially when you're trying to choose something in a new language.
Absolutely.
Do our sources offer any guidance on building a reading list?
They do. They actually provide some great suggestions for books at different levels. So whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced learner, there's something for everyone.
Perfect. Let's break those down. What are some recommendations for someone who's just starting out, a true beginner?
For beginners, they suggest checking out short stories by O. Henry.
Okay.
His stories are known for their simple language, engaging plots, and surprise endings, which make them perfect for building confidence and enjoying the reading experience without getting overwhelmed.
Right.
They also recommend The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. It's technically a children's book, but it's beloved by adults all over the world for its timeless wisdom and simple, beautiful language.
Those are great starting points. What about for intermediate learners, people who have a basic grasp of English, but are ready for something a bit more challenging?
For the intermediate level, they recommend Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl.
Okay.
It's a fun, whimsical story that's still appropriate for adults, and the language is engaging without being overly complex.
I bet.
Another good option is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. It's a bit more philosophical,
Yeah.
but the language is still fairly accessible for intermediate learners, and it's full of beautiful imagery and inspiring messages.
Love those suggestions. Okay, last but not least, what do they recommend for advanced learners? Those who are already quite fluent but want to keep challenging themselves and expanding their vocabulary.
For advanced learners, they recommend tackling classics like To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee
Okay.
and 1984 by George Orwell. These books are known for their complex themes, rich language, and thought-provoking ideas. They're the kind of books that will stay with you long after you finish reading them, and they offer endless opportunities for discussion and analysis.
Those are definitely must-reads for any serious bookworm.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's so encouraging to see that there are great books out there for every level, from beginner to advanced. It really makes the journey of learning English through reading feel more accessible and less intimidating.
Absolutely. And before we wrap up, I want to share one last piece of advice from our sources that I think is incredibly valuable. Pair your reading with comprehension exercises.
Comprehension exercises. What do you mean by that?
It's simple, but powerful. After you finish a chapter or a section of a book, take a few minutes to reflect on what you've just read.
Okay.
You could try writing a short summary,
Right.
discussing the plot points with a friend,
Yeah.
or even searching for some comprehension questions online related to the book.
Oh, that's a good idea.
The key is to actively engage with the material, to make sure you're not just passively reading the words, but actually understanding and remembering the information.
It's like turning reading into a workout for your brain.
It is.
And the more you work those comprehension muscles, the stronger they'll become.
Exactly. It's all about turning reading into an active, engaging experience that will help you learn and grow in ways you might not even expect.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. We've explored the science behind why reading is so effective for language learners.
You have.
We've unpacked a toolkit of strategies for making reading a fun and rewarding habit.
Right.
And we've been inspired by incredible stories of real people who have transformed their lives through reading.
I agree.
What are your final takeaways for our listeners today?
If there's one thing I hope you take away from this deep dive, it's this. Reading in English is more than just a method. It's an experience. It's a way to connect with stories, with different cultures, with different ways of thinking, and with yourself. The more you read, the richer your understanding of the English language will become, to the point where you might even start thinking and dreaming in English.
I love that. It's such a beautiful reminder that language learning is about so much more than just memorizing grammar rules and vocabulary lists. It's about opening yourself up to a whole new world of possibilities and embracing the joy of discovery.
Exactly. And it's a journey that's worth taking, even if it's one small step at a time.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. And to all our listeners out there, happy reading.